Now, video games are designed to challenge us, and we feel a great sense of accomplishment when we complete a particularly tough level, or tricky puzzle, or arduous boss. Having said that, though, even the most brutal trials and tribulations can be beaten purely by trial and error. Sometimes you can just crack a mind-boggling conundrum through dumb luck. But there are certain titles that you can only beat by relying on your grey matter. Nobody on the planet has won The Secret of Monkey Island or Lemmings through guesswork and chance. And while playing head-scratchers like these, you can only come out on top by paying attention, deciphering clues, recognizing patterns, scouring every nook and cranny, and above all else, trying everything you can think of. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 video games that make you feel like a genius. Number 10. The TALOS Principle. Because the TALOS principle has the player perform dangerous puzzles on the behalf of an unseen entity pretending to be a benevolent force, you can see why Crow Team's game is often compared to Portal. But there is one major difference between these two properties. Upon entering each new room in the TALOS principle, you're not offered the slightest clue as to what to do next. The first few puzzles usually revolve around deactivating guns, hiding from mobile turrets, and opening gates in order to collect artifacts. They kind of look suspiciously like Tetris blocks. Now, as simple as that sounds, you'll be left scratching your head more often than not. And if you thought these first few perplexities were beyond you, you just wait and see what the game has in store for you later. As frustrating as the challenges in the TALOS principle can be, it's rarely unfair. By observing your surroundings and playing around with the positioning of each item, you should be able to reach your destination. At first, the majority of puzzles seem impossible to solve, but upon completion, you'll wonder why you didn't crack them sooner. Number 9. BRAID. BRAID is defined by its chrono-manipulating mechanics, which allow the player to reverse time even after they die. And since this power can be used indefinitely, you'd think that it would take the challenge out of the gameplay. But just as you feel like you're getting the hang of things, BRAID keeps introducing new time abilities. When you encounter regions unaffected by time changes, you realize that you can't rely on the same old techniques if you wish to continue. Although these sort of limitations can be frustrating in a game, it never feels that way in BRAID. Anytime you unlock a skill, you feel like a child who just found a batch of new toys to play with. The moment you figure out how to use certain tools, especially the shadow doppelganger, your eyes light up, knowing that you just opened a doorway to endless possibilities. Some puzzles require so much precision that you may feel like giving up, but after a while, pulling off the hardest moves will become second nature. And when you unlock the speedrun mode, you'll be compelled to give BRAID another go, just to see if there are more tricks to learn. Number 8. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask takes place in the land of Termina, which is destined to be obliterated by the moon in 3 days. By playing the Ocarina of Time, Link can return to the dawn of the first day, giving him another 72 hours to save the world. By resetting the clock over and over, you'll quickly notice the NPCs follow a scripted pattern. After memorizing the characters' actions at specific times, you can solve their problems, which will reward you with crucial items and access to key areas. Now, it can be exhausting to follow NPCs throughout the day, but necessary to complete certain quests. But that's not all. As expected, each dungeon is filled with intricate puzzles which are sure to test your mettle. However, the Stone Temple, well, that's amongst the hardest levels in the entire franchise. Throughout the dungeon, you'll need to rotate entire rooms, meaning that you'll have to memorize most areas in their normal and inverted form. Because certain areas cannot be accessed until several switches have been activated simultaneously, you need to create clones of yourself and place them on the switches, which is infuriatingly complicated sometimes. But that's easy as pie compared to unlocking the Fierce Deity Mask. You can only be rewarded with this coveted item by obtaining 23 masks, many of which require you to perform a series of complex puzzles. Although it sounds excessive to complete hundreds of challenges to get just one mask, you will feel like a mastermind when you finally get your hands on it. Number 7. AMNESIA: The Dark Descent. Now, no matter how tough a puzzle is, there is always one constant which will see it unlocked, and that is time. It may take hours, weeks, years, but even the most convoluted enigma will be solved once you exhaust every possible solution. Unfortunately, that isn't exactly the case with AMNESIA: The Dark Descent. At first, the puzzles seem simple, since they usually revolve around fixing machinery or opening access points. But unlike most puzzle games, you don't get the luxury of time. Since there are monsters lurking around every corner, you can never rest easy. As you try to find an exit or memorize the right order to press levers, your concentration will be constantly impaired every time you you hear an unseen creature shambling nearby. But that's not even the worst part. Time isn't your greatest enemy in this game, darkness is. Unless you're well stocked in oil lamp and tinder boxes, you can't see a bloody thing. And if you can't see, you panic, making it impossible to decode even the simplest problem. So instead of panicking, you need to perform every puzzle with speed, precision, and hyper-alertness of your surroundings. Number 6. Lemmings. If you were a kid growing up in the 90s, the first game that really tested your cerebrum was probably Lemmings. In this adorable puzzle strategy title, the player guides the tribe of titular rodents through a series of obstacles in order to reach the exit. Now, these obstacles could be a sandcastle or chasm, or tentacles growing out of the eye sockets of a bloody skull. Yeah, it's a lot more messed up than you remember actually, this game, but either way the objective is the same. In each level, you must figure out which of the 8 skills to assign to the lemmings in order to help them reach their goal. These skills can help the fuzzy critters dig tunnels, bash through walls, build bridges, or block off hazardous zones. But it's not just about what skill to designate your troop with, but when. If a lemming doesn't complete a bridge by the time that his squad reaches them, well, they'll just tumble to their death. Lemmings may seem simple by today's standards, but it still definitely holds up. Because every level can only be completed through strategy rather than chance, you can't help feeling proud upon seeing the cute characters arriving in their home safe and sound. Number 5. Opus Magnum. Zachtronics is an indie gaming studio that creates programming games such as Spacecam, Exapunks, and Infinifactory. However, it's very fitting how the company's magnum opus happens to be a game called Opus Magnum. Playing as an alchemist, you must rotate atomic elements on a hex grid in order to create compounds. To devise the perfect solution, you will need time, patience, and above all, brain power. If that premise sounds off-putting, well, that's totally understandable. Chemistry is really difficult. Alchemy is also really difficult and also fictional, and by putting the two together, you think that Opus Magnum would be just too hard to follow for most. Although Opus Magnum does take a while to get a hang of, you'll be flying through it within an hour. Once you picked up the basics, you'll be able to bypass sections in a second that would initially stop you dead. But Opus Magnum is not just about creating compounds, but forging them in the shortest time with the least amount of materials, and in the smallest amount of space. Because you're competing with others on an online leaderboard, you'll be compelled to try again and again, just to see if you can fine-tune your craftsmanship. Number 4. LA Noire. Throughout LA Noire, you must conduct a series of criminal investigations for the Los Angeles Police Department. While speaking to suspects and witnesses, you need to study their facial expressions to tell if they're telling the truth and adjust your line of questioning accordingly. Despite the fact LA Noire's biggest selling point was solving crimes by reading body language, it's not all that difficult to tell if a criminal is lying when their face is twitching like bloody crazy. In fact, it's probably the easiest part of each case. The rest of the investigation, well, that is sure to leave you stumped sometimes. As you arrive at a crime scene, it's not just about discovering clues. You need to find the clues in a specific order and figure out how they're connected. Sometimes the answer won't come to you unless you visit multiple locations. So, once you piece everything together, the interrogation should be easy, right? Well, wrong. Even when you know a perp is lying through their teeth, you won't be able to get anything out of them unless you make the right accusation. But when you have a dozen pieces of evidence, it's hard to know which one is applicable to prove the suspect is full of it. If you bring up the wrong subject, you could be stonewalled. And this will prevent you from uncovering new clues which can mess up your whole case. As a result, you can spend 5 minutes looking at every piece of evidence during an interrogation just to make sure you don't say the wrong thing. Number 3. The Secret of Monkey Island. First-time players of The Secret of Monkey Island were baffled to see that there were no levels or conventional enemy encounters. Unlike most titles at the time, you couldn't progress by blasting everything in sight, stomping on baddies, or hopping across floating platforms. Instead, you had to think, you had to explore, you had to hunt for hints and experiment. Although many point-and-click adventures rely on the classic strategy of tapping on absolutely everything, Monkey Island focused on interacting with the NPCs in order to uncover clues. Now, this strategy wasn't anything new at the time. I mean, Castlevania 2, which came out 3 years prior, relied on the same mechanic, but Monkey Island stood out since it was among the first titles to make use of dialogue trees while speaking to computer players. You wouldn't get hints just by talking to the locals, you had to ask the right questions. As a result, you can only advance by paying attention to what you've been told. The Secret of Monkey Island may not have been the first of its kind, but it probably was the first game you played where you had a pen and paper on hand in order to keep tabs on vital info and clues. Number 2. Professor Layton and the Unwound Future. No matter how difficult a puzzle is, there's always somebody who can solve it effortlessly. Even though Tetris and Bubble Bobble can be tricky, players who have a knack for tile matching, they'll have no problem. And if real-time management comes naturally to you, then SimCity or Roller Coaster Tycoon, well, that's just going to be a breeze. However, nobody finds the Professor Layton franchise easy, especially the third installment, The Unwound Future. Throughout your adventure, the titular professor and his ward must solve puzzles for NPCs in order to progress through the story. However, The Unwound Future doesn't focus on just one kind of puzzle. Instead, you have to perform every kind of brain teaser that you can imagine. It doesn't matter if you're regarded as a prodigy. When you have to endure puzzles revolving around pattern recognition, spatial visualization, logical conundrums, ciphers, math problems, at least one or two of them are bound to trip you up. But because of The Unwound Future's balanced difficulty, not even the hardest puzzles will feel like they are beyond you. Although you will struggle on numerous occasions, it just makes these mind-bending challenges even more rewarding when you finally solve them. And number 1, Portal. At its core, Portal couldn't be more straightforward. Using your portal gun, you can create an orange portal and a blue portal. If you go into one, you come out on the other. And by using this device, you need to figure out how to get out of each test chamber. And with that simple premise, Valve managed to create one of the most celebrated games ever. Although Portal was praised for its clever writing and witty humor, it's the vortex shooting gun that takes center stage. Because of this weapon's infinite potential, you can feel compelled to experiment with it endlessly. And bizarrely, it's while you're faffing around with this tool that you'll actually usually make your astounding discoveries. The first time you redirect a bot's bullets through a portal, your jaw will drop. When you discover your velocity is affected by how fast you travel through the wormhole, well, it's going to blow your mind. The learning curve is flawless since you never feel clueless or spoon-fed. You're always given the right amount of instructions, so you feel like you and you alone are responsible for completing each test. Now, once you beat Portal, you may worry it has little replayability now that you know how to beat each chamber. But nothing could be further from the truth, because you could play Portal for years and still discover new neat little tricks that will make you think, wait, you could do that? Well, that's going to change my speedrunning potential immensely. And there we go, my friends. Those were 10 video games that made you feel like a genius. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. As always, I've been Jules, and you can go follow me over on Instagram at RetroJ, but the O is a 0. Hope to see you over there, my friends. But before I go, I just want to say one thing. I hope you're treating yourself well, my friend, and remember, the true genius move of all things is to treat yourself with kindness and positivity, because you are a good person and you deserve love, happiness, and success like everybody does. So I hope you're smashing your life goals, my friend. And remember, above all else, you are a massive ledge. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that. And I'll speak to you soon. Bye.